Hi guys, it's Amanda from Designs by Amanda K, and today we are going to be covering the basics of brush lettering. So brush lettering is a super popular thing right now. It is kind of like a modern take on calligraphy, but obviously it's a little bit easier to do than traditional calligraphy. I have not actually tried traditional calligraphy, but I would assume this method, brush lettering, is way easier. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to actually be using a Tombow dual tip pen. So one side is going to be a brush tip, the other side is a fine tip. You don't have to rush out. If you're just beginning, you don't need to rush out and pick up the most expensive thing. Unfortunately, these Tombows aren't exactly cheap. So if you happen to have just a regular marker laying around, you can use like just a regular washable Crayola marker, even a Sharpie if you wanted. This is basically just to get you used to doing the muscle memory needed for the basic brush lettering. So brush lettering. This tip is what they call a brush tip, so it is tapered towards the end, but it's flexible. That's the big thing. Let's see if I can focus that. So the tip is flexible. It's not just a fixed tip, so that will help you get the thicker down and the thin up, because different pressure will give you different thicknesses on the lines. There are some actual real brush tip markers out there. I don't remember the brand, but I did buy some off Amazon. I'll link to in the blog post, that are actual little hairs. So it's actually like a brush, but it's filled with ink like a pen. So I really like those because it gives you kind of a varied look, like you actually painted it. So those are cool. But back to the point of this video. Sorry, I tend to ramble a little bit. So basics of brush lettering. So anytime you are writing a letter, you will have downstrokes and upstrokes. Those are the basic foundations of letters. So with brush calligraphy, what you want to remember is that all your downstrokes are going to be thicker and all your upstrokes are going to be thinner. Which means downstrokes are going to apply a little bit more pressure, upstrokes not as much pressure. So one way to get used to your marker and actually doing the thick downstrokes and the thin upstrokes is to just practice some basic lines. So to start out, I will just do some basic downstrokes. So it'd be like drawing the letter I, a capital letter I. So I'm just going to go down with the marker. And one thing about Tombows is they like to squeak on your downstrokes. But see how I'm getting a thick line when I'm going down? I'm not applying a ton of pressure, but I'm still getting a thicker line. You actually don't want to apply a ton of pressure because these little tips will start to fray, and you don't want that. When I was starting out, I was putting way too much pressure on my downstrokes and my tips got worn out super quickly. Okay, so these are your thicker downstrokes. So then when you're doing your upstrokes, you're not going to apply as much pressure. You want to make sure that the tip is still touching the paper consistently, but you don't want to put as much pressure as you did on the downstrokes. So for the upstrokes, you're just doing a light line. If you have a shaky hand, that's okay. You will get a little shakiness in your lighter strokes. I still do. I just have a shaky hand. I can't do anything about it. That's just me. And no, I did not have too much caffeine today. But the one good thing is when you have these dual tips, you can just go back over it if you want. and make them more uniform. But you don't have to. But basically, I'm barely touching the paper and just doing a thin line up. So definitely you can tell the difference between these thicker down strokes versus these thinner up strokes. So once you've done a couple lines of that, then practice doing them together. So we'll do down and then up again for our next row. So we'll do a thick down stroke and a thin up stroke. So I'm putting more pressure when I'm coming down and picking the pen up a little bit when I go up. So thick, thin, thick, thin. And then I'm doing a little loop as I come up, because a lot of the letters that you'll do will have that loop. Sorry for my sniffling. Started this video and decided that something was going to be bothering me in the air, so. Alright, so then our next row we'll do the opposite. So we'll do a thin upstroke and a thick downstroke. So thin, thick. Doing kind of like a little hump. Thin, thick, thin, thick. And these, it's just basically helping you kind of get the hang of the thick versus the thin and how much pressure you'll need for each stroke. So after you've done a couple rows of that and you're really starting to get the hang of it, then let's do a continuous loop. So we'll start with down, up, down, up. Got a little sloppy at the end there, but you kind of get the idea. So once you feel more comfortable with all of these ups and downs, you can move on to practicing some letters. I will share some brush lettering practice sheets that you can download. That will be this Friday's freebie, so make sure you come back for that. But for right now, I'm just gonna kind of do a little show on writing each letter. And keep in mind too that each calligrapher has a different style of how they write each letter. This is just kind of your basic style. And as you practice, you'll kind of develop your own style. It's like everybody has their own unique handwriting. Everybody has their own unique brush lettering style. So keep that in mind. This is just the basic, your basic ABC. So, all right, let's start. Oh, one more thing. Let me mention, when you think of cursive writing, or at least when I was taught cursive writing, you were taught that your words were one continuous flow of letters. In brush calligraphy, that's not the case. You actually do pick up your pen a lot of times between each letter or stroke, whereas basic cursive writing, it's one continuous flow of letters. So keep that in mind as well. Think of it as you are drawing each individual letter. Instead of drawing a word, you're drawing each letter, if that makes sense. I do like when you're starting out to practice on graph paper, because it helps you kind of get an idea of the size of each words and or letter, and it helps you be consistent in your sizes. Does anybody else have to sing the alphabet kind of in their head when they're writing out each letter? Because I just did. There really is no wrong or right way to write the letters. Again, this is just kind of the basics. Some good letters when you're starting out to practice with are I's, M's, N's. U is also a good one because you're getting the basic strokes. Whereas kind of like the B's and the F's, and those are the H, J, K is really hard. Those are kind of a little bit more difficult. There's more loops and stuff in them, but you'll get the hang of it pretty quickly. You see how the Q is like different. I separated the strokes. I did the same thing with the A and the G. You start with like the C stroke, and then you pick up your pen and you go down and do the downstroke. Just had to sing the alphabet again. What comes after Q? See how I'm picking up my pen after each little stroke? So there's all the letters. So if you want to keep going with your practice, start writing some basic words. So I'll do a couple of my favorite that are pretty easy. Love. But you see how I picked up my pen between each word and a lot of times between each stroke. So yeah, just keep practicing. Start out with just your basic strokes and then move on to words or to the letters, and then when you feel really confident, then move on to your words. All right, thanks guys.